Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, I'm Gerben. So, Rick,
Yeah.
you have something new to share about app configuration.
Yes. So, for those of you who don't know, app configuration is a centralized configuration store inside of Azure that you can actually use to connect to. If you want to have one central location with all of your settings, and you don't want to manage settings like, for instance, in two app services and a function app and in even more places.
Environment settings or all over the place.
You want to have it in one central location so you can have management on who has access and who doesn't, and work from there. Because if your application ecosystem consists of multiple applications, you don't want to manage the database connection string everywhere. You just want to do that in one location and work from there.
Yep.
Now, if we dive into my screen, we can see a demo that I did actually do earlier. This is from Configuration in Azure Done Right, which is a talk I do, but also we have that as an episode as well, I think. And what we see here is how we can use configuration or app configuration in an ASP NET program. So if we look at what's actually happening here, in the configure app configuration, which is normal configuration for an ASP NET app, we add Azure app configuration with a connection string to go there.
So you're linking your app up to app configuration.
Yeah. Now, normally you would do this potentially with, or presumably with a managed identity. For now, this just works with a connection string so that we can connect to the app configuration store, get our settings, and then we're happy. Now, the cool thing is, this actually adds it to your iConfiguration inside of your ASP NET application. So if you want to use it somewhere, you just insert iConfiguration into the constructor and use it from there.
For your code, it's transparent of where that configuration is located.
But also for all of your developers. They don't even need to know where stuff is, since the cool thing is everything is stacked on top of each other. So if you add Azure app configuration, your application will first check, is this setting in app configuration? If it's not, I'll try app settings from your app service, for instance, if it's running there. If it's not there, it will check a web config and app settings.json, even environment variables. So all of those will be checked accordingly.
So all kind of fallbacks, and if you're in a development scenario, you can have or maybe override stuff or have some certain keys on your local machine, and then it will be picked up and transparent for your code.
Yeah. Now, one thing I would like to add, and that's not necessarily important for the topic at hand, but it is based on app configuration. App configuration is built as a service to get your configuration from. However, you are being tracked the amount of times that you are checking for new versions of app configuration values, and as soon as you go over the standard included number of requests, you pay a bit extra for each request you do to see if there's new versions of the configuration available.
This is of the total configuration of a specific value from that configuration?
It's for the app configuration instance.
Okay.
So the cool thing is, let's say we have an application that has 4 configuration values in app configuration, and you want to check automatically from ASP NET if there's new versions available so that you can update the configuration while your application is running. So that's cool. That's completely supported, running it from program.cs, the configuration. You set it to, for instance, go every 2.5 minutes or every 10 minutes, check if there's new version. If it's there, refresh everything, make sure we get the latest version. Now, of course, this would mean if you do that check for those 4 values, that you have 4 checks every 2.5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. This tends to get really big if you have a lot of settings and you would like to keep your settings up to date in your applications. Now, the cool thing here is that Microsoft themselves actually provide a solution for this, which they call a Sentinel key. And what they actually say that you should do is create one key that holds the value of the last update of any of the keys. So as soon as one of those 4 is updated, you also update the Sentinel key, and that's the only one you check. So instead of having 4 checks every 2 minutes, you have 1 check. And then as soon as it is different, Then you can say, let's load in the complete new version of all of the values that are in there. So even if you have 1,000 values and you check it every minute, you only have one check every minute until it gets changed, and then it pulls in everything.
And is it done automatically, that Sentinel key? So is that provided, or do you have to provision something yourself?
You have to do that yourself. So currently I have one application running where I actually have a thing called Sentinel, and I have a management dashboard inside of the application where they can actually manage the settings. And as soon as any of the settings change and they write to app configuration, we just update Sentinel with the datetime.now. And that's actually the key that we use to validate if there's something new, and if it's new, update the entire
then
configuration.
Get everything. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to my screen, we go to here we can see just like you said, underscore configuration, which means it's totally transparent. You don't need to know where the settings come from. However, we might have a tool that actually doesn't have an SDK that fits app configuration. Or the SDK, or we might have an old application that we don't want to update, or that doesn't support ASP NET, or that.
Yeah.
So Microsoft has worked on that, and currently in preview are app configuration references. Now we know these from Key Vault because we had Key Vault references, but now we have app configuration references as well, which means any app service or function app running in Azure can use settings from app configuration without even changing one line of code. So
it's more like a link from Azure to Azure.
Yeah.
Linking things together without having to code something in.
Completely that one. So the platform takes that away from you. And again, if you have the need for something like auto updating your values with a Sentinel key, then you're going to implement something
then
yourself.
You need to program it. Yeah, you need to program it yourself.
Still, as we saw, it's only like 3 lines of code, so it's not that difficult. But still, it's code. But we can also use the references. So what that actually looks like is something that looks a lot like Key Vault. I have 2 examples here now on my screen, and actually the first one is at Microsoft.AppConfiguration. This actually says to, let's take app service as an example. This says to the app service, the value for this setting is to be found in a app configuration instance somewhere. That's the at Microsoft.AppConfiguration, and not completely by coincidence, this is also the name of the resource of app configuration inside of Azure. And then you actually specify at least 2 things, which is what's the endpoint of the Azure app configuration, and which key would you like to get.
So the endpoint is something that you get from like the portal where your app configuration lives. You can get the URL.
Yeah, so for instance, if we go to the portal and we go app configuration right here, I think I have a few. So let's go to this app configuration. We actually have the endpoints right there available, right? So that's something that you configure, and then the name of the key that you would like to get. And this is a value that you can specify, but you don't have to. The label, so you can even filter on labels. For instance, a production environment versus an acceptance environment could give different values back. You can specify that label as well.
So you then would have the same key, different label.
Yeah.
In this case. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and again, with configuring it in code, you can even stack those. You could say first, always try the label with the name production, then try the label with the name acceptance. Otherwise, take the default.
Ah, okay.
So that's actually pretty cool as well. Anyhow, there's a lot of cool things about app configuration.
Yeah.
But this is not enough, since app configuration, just this endpoint and a name of a key, of course, it would be horrible if that means that you could get the configuration now anyhow. So what you need to do is you need to create a system-assigned managed identity, connect that to your application, or create that on the application that you would like to enable to use app configuration references. And then you give that the role of app configuration data reader on the app configuration where it needs to read.
And then it can get...
and then you can use these app configuration references. Yeah. One thing that is important to say, this is in preview. Currently, it does not support network restricted resources. So if your app configuration is in a VNet and doesn't have public accessibility, currently it's not supported using that with app configuration references.
So it needs a public endpoint, a public endpoint that it can reach.
Yeah, yeah. So
for now, then at least.
Yes, at least for now. So the cool thing is, even if your code runs, has been running for 10 years and you don't want to even touch it anymore, or if it uses a language or a framework that doesn't support using app configuration as an SDK, or you don't want to implement that API call, you can now use app configuration references by just creating a managed identity, giving it the right role, and then specifying your values like this.
For instance, like a service, an app service or a function, where do you put these kind of strings?
What you do is you go to the actual service that you would like to give access to this configuration. Thank you. Yep. So, for instance, in this case, this would be an app service. So we have the configuration in Azure Done Right website right here, and then under configuration we have the application settings. We have the application settings, and then here I could say I have a new application setting, which is a setting 1. It looks like I already have a setting 1, so let's make that setting 2.
You done it once.
And then in there you actually add
so there's the string,
the reference.
Yeah.
So this would now mean that if my application tries to get setting 2, it automatically sees, hey, I would need to go to app configuration, let's use my managed identity to go there.
Cool.
It is possible to also do this with a user-assigned managed identity, but then you have to do a little bit more work. It's all neatly documented on the documents page with the preview tag still on it. But this is how you specify that app configuration reference, so your application can just go there and get its setting.
Yeah, a really cool way to. You don't have to program. You can use it maybe for some legacy systems that run on Azure, and still be able to harness the power of app configurations.
Yeah, and the fact that you have one central location where you manage all of your configuration.
Yeah, really cool.
So I think that's powerful.
Really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.